field itself. The idea of how it looks in template form is as, in a two-dimensional description, just for the sake of convenience, like two overlapping Fibonacci spirals going in opposite directions radiating from a central point.
Hi.
And to you, good day.
Such a pleasure to see you again.
It is always a pleasure to interact with you as well.
I have a few short questions and then something to discuss with you.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the short questions.
All right.
There has been like two books written a long time ago around soul schools by Michael Newton, how we are always in this soul pod and we're actually in school learning to grow.
In many different ways, yes. In many different ways, yes.
Yes. And does this happen with more advanced or civilizations that are already aware of the different?
There is always more to learn. There is always room for growth. It never ends.
That's great. There is kind of like for you, like you say, you don't sleep, you don't eat. So is there still this this kind of sleep state that we go into, and then this awake state, although they can be the opposite at a soul level?
Yes.
That you experience, or it's more of just an understanding that?
For more, it's a constant experience of walking through different dimensions of space and time and spirit, constantly in a dream, constantly awake. But again, we also have what you might call mentors, teachers, higher dimensional beings that are also helping us to experience more things beyond the point to which we have already evolved. Again, it never ends. They have their mentors. They have their mentors.
Sure. So compared
and even the idea of all that is can still experience different versions of all that is. It never ends.
It can just become perhaps a little more conscious.
That is exactly what happens. You expand your consciousness to contain, in more awareness, another level within yourself.
Yes, got it. Thank you. Is the average human life expected to be longer?
Yes, because the paradox is the more you live in the moment, in a sense, the less aging you experience, and therefore you appear to live longer in physical terms.
But not necessarily in like how we calculate age?
Well, in other words, just as we, on average, though there are longer lived beings in our society, on average, will live to about 300, but will probably look to you like we're about 30.
Mm-hmm.
So you are achieving this slowly as humanity. Many of you, not all of you, but many of you.
Because there's a lot of people are starting to talk about how actually we should be able to live up to 140 years.
Oh yes, easily. And most likely you will find that within the next 50 to 75 years, that might be about the average lifespan. Maybe 120 to 150, depending upon the individual.
Wow. But there is also this collective that needs to be moving along for that to be happening for those individuals as well.
Yes, but again, remember that when you shift to another version of Earth that already has that collective.
Right. That's true.
I know, that's why I said it.
Yeah, thank you. In the near future, will we find a new material to replace plastic, or would we be able to find a way to break down plastics sooner?
Well, both. What we utilize is based on something your scientists understand to be nanotechnological. And it is a kind of crystalline metallic form that has plastic qualities that can change and shift its shape as it needs to and provide many different kinds of effects and have many different kinds of uses. Our ships, in a sense, are grown, and they have this ability to shift their shape and even within the cabin to provide what we need when we need it, and when we don't need it, it simply absorbs back into the walls or the floors or the ceilings. And it's all made out of the same seamless material.
That's so exciting.
Yes. So you're approaching this idea of this nanotechnology slowly. You'll arrive at something similar in the relatively near future.
That's great. That's great. Um, um, I don't know whether people have asked this, but as we're approaching open contact, and
Yes.
I'm just like putting everything you've spoken about, how in there is no in the whole all of in all that is, there is positive and negative and all that. So there must be positive and negative extraterrestrials as well.
Well, yes, but your planet is not really dealing with what you would consider to be truly the negative ones. There may be some that have different agendas than you that are visiting your world. There may be some that don't pay much attention to you. There may be some that don't necessarily understand you and so can come off somewhat negative or cold to you or unfeeling or uncaring. But none of them that you're dealing with are really what you would consider to be malevolent.
Is that because of the kind of school Earth is?
Yes, and also because the vibrational changing that you are aligning with simply doesn't allow for those kinds of beings to find the version of Earth that you're creating for yourself, because it's too vibrationally incompatible.
Meaning we're quite vibrationally positive?
Those that align with that are and can never experience something that's that vibrationally negative outside of your own reality. Because Earth is its own island in a sense, collectively speaking, and it's going through different kinds of transitions collectively as well. Most of them are simply not compatible with beings that you would find to be relatively malevolent, although of course there are some versions of Earth that are, but you're not on them. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking to you.
Sure. Yay. Okay, good. It makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah,
because there would be no point in it.
that's right. That's right.
So yes, there are versions of Earth experiencing extremely malevolent extraterrestrial beings, but that simply has nothing to do with the ones that we are communicating to you in.
Right. And that's not the one I'm in.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking.
Yes, got it.
One moment, we heard a question. Yes, of course, we might communicate with some versions of Earth that have the capacity to shift from the negative to the positive vibration, because certainly that's to some degree what we're doing with your experience of the different versions of Earth. But I'm simply saying that below a certain threshold, there's not going to be necessarily choices being made by the collective consciousness that would allow themselves to shift to something more positive, and therefore those are the ones that would be pointless for us at this point to communicate with. So yes, we might communicate with some that have the potential to change, but not with the ones that have chosen no potential to change in that direction.
Totally get it. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you, Bashar.
Good day.
Good day.
Well, again, the basic definitions, mechanically speaking, is that positive energy integrates, builds, expands, supports toward the idea of unity, harmony, understanding, awareness. Negative energy is that which segregates, separates, compartmentalizes, disconnects, diminishes. Now again, these things can be used in a variety of ways, because positive beliefs can be used negatively, negative beliefs can be used positively, or shall we say more precisely, limitations placed upon the consciousness are placed there through a negative mechanism of focusing and lessening your awareness so that you're only focused on physical reality, for example, and not the rest of your being. But the idea is that's a positive use, because without that use of the negative energy, the negative mechanism to focus you in physical reality, you couldn't have a physical reality experience, because you would be caught up in the awareness of the rest of your being. Your focus would be too broad. So the idea, again, is we're talking about mechanical effects, in a sense, the use of energy, the use of vibrational patterns to achieve certain ends. But when you have the idea of negative energy, negative beliefs that are perpetuating themselves to the detriment of the individual, not to the individual's advantage, then you have a cycle of spiraling downward, self-reinforced experiences of negativity, of diminishment, of disconnection. And the positive reinforcing itself allows you to continue to expand, grow, let go of what doesn't work for you, replace it with something else. It gives you a choice. Whereas the idea of the negative energy doesn't so much allow you to be aware of choices you could be making. That would be the simplest definition, is it's all about the ability and the freedom to choose, as opposed to a lack of awareness of your ability to do that.
So can certain emotions be classified as positive and negative emotions?
Yes and no. Again, the idea is that all emotions are simply results, reflections of positive or negative beliefs. And again, we're talking about the idea of a mechanism, of an energy state. We're not putting a value judgment on this, that this is good and this is bad. We're simply talking physics, energy states. So while the emotions themselves are not exactly positive and negative per se, they can be reflective of positive beliefs or negative beliefs in terms of their energetic structure.
Would you say that we perceive and associate negative energy with negative emotions and positive energy with positive emotions?
Generally, you do that. But again, as we have said, these things can be used in both directions. So the idea is that, as we say, when you come upon something that you recognize, that you observe is out of alignment with your truth, you might feel a rush of what is typically referred to as anger, and most people would say that's a negative emotion. But in fact, the natural anger is simply a rush of energetic alignment or misalignment or recognition thereof of misalignment or alignment that allows you to make a decision and proceed however it is you really prefer to. But if the idea of the rush of recognition of misalignment with a concept lasts for maybe more than about 15 seconds, then yes, it can be representative of the idea of negative judgments and belief systems and definitions that are perpetuating that particular experience of emotion longer than would actually be necessary to use a positive or apply a positive effect to the recognition that something is out of alignment with you, so that you can move forward in a more positive way through that recognition that might be temporarily experienced as, quote unquote, the use of negative energy.
So how does that connect with the idea of high vibrational states and low vibrational states?
Well, generally speaking, high vibrational states generally are associated with positive energy because they are integrative and therefore they build up and increase the frequency because it's more integrative and more expansive. Whereas the idea of the diminishment of frequency is usually associated with the negative belief because it is compartmentalizing, separating, segregating, disconnecting in its experience, and therefore that equates generally to a diminishment of frequency in terms of the kind of energy we're talking about.
So is the idea that if a person is actually coming from a negative psychological state and they feel a rush of excitement and things like that, but it's actually based on the idea of diminishment of another person,
then it's not excitement that they're experiencing, it's a rush of anxiety. In other words, this is what goes back to what we began this transmission with: honesty in self-evaluation, so that you can have greater discernment in recognizing the difference between true excitement and anxiety within yourself. Because you can disguise them with dishonesty, with an inability or an unwillingness to really look at the belief systems within you and the reasons for why you choose to do what it is you choose to do. This is why it's so important to not be afraid to really look deeply at your belief systems, so that you don't confuse the idea of anxiety with excitement, and vice versa, confuse excitement for anxiety.
Right. So you can see that it really is a process of understanding these concepts and not necessarily just immediately thinking because you have a certain emotion, that's a positive, higher vibrational state. You need to
Yes.
understand why you're feeling what you're feeling.
Yes, it's not about what you call knee-jerk reactions, either in positive or negative direction, but a realization, a clear understanding of why you're having the emotional reactions and responses you are, by getting in touch with the belief systems behind them to make sure that you are honest and clear within your ability to discern the difference.
So what would you say is the purpose of negative energy and negative beliefs?
Well, I just gave you one example. Without the idea of the use of a negative mechanism to impose certain limitations of focus upon your consciousness, you wouldn't be able to have a physical reality experience. So it can be used for a variety of reasons. And also, of course, as a comparative or contrasting energy, because sometimes by attracting what you might call a negative scenario in your life, you have a better understanding or a clearer understanding by comparison of what might be a positive scenario in your life. So it's sort of the old saying of it's easier to see a candlelight when it's surrounded by darkness.
And emotions and energy can be used in positive and negative ways. And we always have to keep that in mind.
Yes.
So does it mean that if we're talking to you that we're moving in a positive direction?
Generally speaking. But again, it depends upon what you do with what you have gained from the conversation. It's not just about the connection. It's about what you do with the connection. Because you can listen to us all day long and then go off and misinterpret, misunderstand some of the things we have said, or simply choose to misapply or apply them in a negative way in your life. So again, remember, it's not about what happens, it's about what you do with what happens that makes the difference in how you experience your reality.
And along
generally speaking, people that are interacting with us, on general, will be expanding their consciousness and thus raising their frequency if they are willing to allow the conversation to be what it needs to be for them, in allowing it to serve them in a positive way. That is a general truth. But again, it doesn't prevent someone from using it however they wish. We just want to be clear about that.
Okay, that's great. And along the lines of discernment, how can a person tell if a channel is real, so to speak, and whether or not they're actually channeling the entity's identity or existence for real?
It's not about determining whether the entity or the channel is quote-unquote real. As we have said before, it's about whether or not the information coming through that being works for you. Does it align with you in a way that allows you more freedom, more self-empowerment, more of what you prefer in your life? Or does it attempt to, shall we say, sow control or seed the ideas of control and you must do this and insistence on that? The idea, again, is does it expand you or does it diminish you in terms of how you apply that information? Please do remember, and this includes us as well, take what works for you and leave the rest behind. You get to determine what the information is for you and how valid or not valid it is for you. So it's not about whether the entity is real or accurate. It's about, does the information allow you to be using that information in a way that you prefer, or does it attempt to limit you in ways that you don't prefer?
At one of your live events in Sedona, people saw me and they thought I was the celebrity Frances Fisher, which was really awesome. But as I've traveled all over the globe, people often think I'm someone they know. In fact, I walked into a store and this gentleman walked up to me with open arms and said, "Pat," and he was so happy to see me, but I wasn't Pat. And people will say to me again and again, even after we realize that I'm not the person they think I am, they'll say, "But really, the way you speak and your gestures are just like this person that they know." And I'm wondering what to make of that. It feels like a compliment. It feels really nice, which is great. And maybe that's all there is. But maybe there's something more to it. I mean, when I'm connecting with people, I'm always really excited, like a like a Labrador puppy, to meet people. And it feels like such a good connection, like I'm allowing all that is and source to flow through me and focus on, the best in people and reflect back the best of myself, and all that feels awesome. I'm just wondering if there's something more to it or something that I could use about this thing where people think they know me. Thank you.
Well, again, the idea is that your excitement and desire to be of service in that way makes you a little bit of a chameleon. You will then take on whatever the vibration is that reflects back to them that familiarity, so they feel comfortable enough for you to communicate the energy to them that allows them to move forward in the way that they prefer to. So you're being of service by being a little bit of a reflection of whatever it is they feel they need to be comfortable in accepting that frequency within themselves so they can move forward.
Hi, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Well, firstly, a big thank you for the opportunity to have this interaction.
And a big thank you to you as well for the co-creation of it.
Thank you. Before I'm going to ask my first question, I want to say that I understand that there are different ways to look at this, and that different individuals use different mechanisms for the creation of the experience of Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
And you explained that in general, the majority of people that have the experience of having Alzheimer's has to do with them being in denial about their lives, that they wish to forget, that there is something in them that is to them so painful they cannot deal with it.
This is a very, very generalized response, but it is true for many people, although it is experienced in a multitude of different ways.
Okay. Because I was wondering, we call this process also dementia.
Yes.
It almost seems like the personality structure of the people going through this experience is somehow dissolving, and that they are shifting through different dimensions very rapidly.
Yes, all sorts of mental disorders that in some way, shape, or form reflect or represent an alteration of personality, be it the idea you call of dementia or Alzheimer's, or even dissociative personality disorder or schizophrenia. These things have one thing in common, in general, at their core. It is in some way, shape, or form an inability, due to either belief systems or what have you, to not allow different aspects of the personality to harmonize and blend in a coherent way for the reality that they chose to be in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And I was also wondering, but what's happening on a soul level? How is the soul experiencing this process?
Well, again, it depends upon the reason why a soul may have agreed to have these kinds of experiences, or for the purposes that the soul needs those experiences, or simply in the way that the soul chooses to use them. So it will vary from soul to soul. But overall, the idea is one of seeking integration by creating dissociation, what appears to be disconnection, and then going through the process to arrive at a realization that disconnection is not real, but only an illusion. And that the paradox is, in order to actually have an experience of disconnection, you actually have to be connected. You have to be integrated to have an experience in some sense of disintegration.
Yes, I understand. And can you say that when people go through this process, that they eventually are able to look at the pain that they are, trying to avoid?
Some of them do and some of them don't. Again, it depends upon the choices that have been made for this life theme. Many of them give themselves the probability to arrive at that conclusion, but some of them choose not to, and they make their assessments in spirit after the life.
Okay. And I don't know, maybe in general, does the pain has to do with, a lack of self-worth?
It can. In general, again, a very generalized answer. Everyone will have a specific way of experiencing this if they choose to. All pain is the result, fundamentally, of resistance to the natural self.
Yeah, I understand.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I also have a couple of questions concerning the Anunnaki.
Yes.
You mentioned that the Anunnaki were the first to genetically alter the DNA of the natural evolved Homo erectus here on Earth.
Yes, because at that point, the Homo erectus was available and compatible enough through panspermia millions of years before that for them to make the alteration and find enough similarity in their genetics to do so.
I understand. And I was wondering, after the Homo sapiens came into existence, have there been other alterations in our DNA due to other extraterrestrial races?
Yes, especially the Greys.
Especially the Greys.
Although they're not really an extraterrestrial race in the classic sense.
No, I understand. But for instance, the Pleiadians or any race we know of, do they made some alterations in our DNA also?
Well, not exactly in the same context. Some have been, by agreement, an energy shift that creates an alteration in your DNA by having you be given a frequency that then you choose to align with to create the alteration. But it's not a physiological manipulation in the typical sense.
Okay, I understand. And you also mentioned that the Anunnaki evolved, but did they evolve into a non-physical?
A few of them have, but basically what you know as the Pleiadians is one of the evolutionary offshoots.
Okay. So are the Anunnaki genetically linked to other extraterrestrial races that we know of? Yeah, you just explained it.
Well, I said Pleiadian, yes.
Okay.
And others that you may not know of.
Okay. Okay. And also concerning what we now talked about, I was wondering if I'm correct in my understanding that the Greys and the human beings have the same Anunnaki ancestors, but that the genetic alteration...
Well, not exactly the same, because the Greys come from an alternate version of reality. So they had their own history of interaction with the Anunnaki, but they're not the same Anunnaki because those Anunnaki belong in an alternate parallel universe.
Okay. Okay. Because I was wondering, I read somewhere that as a result, the people who eventually evolved into the Greys had a different expression of these genetic alterations than the human beings in this timeline. But that makes sense. Yeah.
Although the idea is that the humans of that version of Earth didn't, quote unquote, evolve into the Greys. They mutated themselves on purpose to be able to handle the environment that existed when they destroyed their version of Earth.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I thought, it's a mutation. I thought
it's a mutation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for this.
Yes. It is the reason why some of their DNA can be compatible with the DNA of humans on your version of Earth and other versions of Earth, is because they actually started out as human.
Yes.
Otherwise, it would be too incompatible to create hybrids.
Hybrids, yes, exactly. Thank you for this.
Yes.
That was what I wanted to ask you today. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Pleasant dreams to you.
Thank you.